All right, howdy, howdy, howdy. Here we go. A little bit of monopoly. So we're going to be looking at efficiencies in monopoly today. What is bad about a monopoly, but what might be potentially good about a monopoly, and if monopolies have some potential positive uh, reasons to have monopolies, how can we potentially regulate those monopolies and make them even more efficient? So let's look at monopoly and allocative efficiency. We looked at this a little bit last time, but we're gonna look at it one more time, make sure that we understand what it means to be allocatively efficient and our monopolies allocatively efficient. So when we're looking at the monopoly, we're gonna draw remember the firm and the market are the same because there's a single producer. Here's our demand curve. Is demand equal to marginal revenue? No. Marginal revenue falls below the demand curve because as they increase output, they have to lower the price. But the demand curve is the price curve. Here's our marginal cost curve. Our supply curve, more or less, right? So if the firm does what it naturally wants to do, which is maximizing its profit, it will choose to produce where the marginal cost is equal to the marginal revenue. So where is this? This is right here. So the firm wants to be producing at MC equals MR. We make decisions at the margin. So the monopolist will produce this quantity. What price can they charge for that? Well, at this quantity, the consumer is willing to pay. We go up to the price curve, our demand curve, and we see that the consumer is willing to pay PM. So that's the quantity for the monopolist, their profit maximizing quantity, and the price that they would charge the consumer. Is that allocatively efficient? We know what allocative efficiency is. Allocative efficiency is price is equal to marginal cost, meaning that the willingness of the buyer on that last unit matches the marginal cost of producing that last unit. It's right here. Okay. So we can see that if this firm, this monopolist, had been allocatively efficient, they would have been producing a larger output, QA, Q allocative. And the price for QA, coming off the demand curve, would be PA. So they would be producing more at a lower price if they were allocatively efficient. Instead, a monopolist reduces output and charges a higher price. The price is greater than the marginal cost, so they're not allocatively efficient. So what does this, so this is our monopoly, yes, and efficiency. And give me a second here, and I'm just gonna erase before we go on to the next page. Let's try to erase before I go on to the next page, get rid of some of this. I won't be doing a ton of drawing. All right, so we're gonna draw here for a monopoly, and we're gonna be drawing this monopoly earning zero economic profit. So if you've noticed so far, we have yet to look at average total cost. We have yet to determine whether the monopoly is making a profit, making a loss, or are they breaking even. So that's what we're about ready to do here. And so this will be familiar to what we did in the last unit when we were looking at perfect competition. So again, we draw our basic monopoly graph: price, quantity, demand. Get to familiar, I'm just going to be always putting demand is equal to price, our marginal revenue curve falling below the demand curve, and a marginal cost curve. Okay, with our basic graph, we know where they want to produce. We already know that. We know that the firm wants to produce here, profit maximizing quantity output, MC equals MR, right here. So the monopolist wants to produce this, and it wants to charge a price that's coming off the demand curve, or will charge a price coming off the demand curve. all right? So the monopolist, that's their profit maximizing quantity output. MC equals MR, and then that gives you your output, then go up to the demand curve to find the price. Now, if we say that they're earning zero economic profit at this output, that would mean that the price would have to equal average total cost. Okay, so we need to put an average total cost curve in here where the average total cost curve is going to intersect the price right here. So it's going to be tangent to the price. And so we're going to start our average total cost curve. It's falling. We have, you have falling fixed cost. It's going to become tangent. As best as I can draw it on this device. When it hits the marginal cost curve, the additional cost is higher, so our average total cost will begin to rise again. So here's our average total cost. All right. So you're drawing it so it hits right tangent right in here. It's kind of difficult to do on this screen, but at that point right there, your average total cost curve would be tangent to the price, so that your average total cost is equal to your price. So if average total cost is equal to your price, you would be making zero economic profit. So would we experience this in the long run? That's the question out here to the side. Is this, because in perfect competition, we were driven to zero economic profit. So will we have zero economic profit in the long run for monopoly as well? And I imagine that most of you are beginning to understand. You understood very well in the last unit that zero economic profit was the result of freedom to enter and exit the market. When there was a profit, firms would enter and it would drive the price back down and the profits would evaporate. When there were economic losses, firms would exit and the price would rise and they would resume back to zero economic profit. But in a monopoly, we know that there are barriers to entry. And so with those barriers to entry, they will not be driven to zero economic profit. So because there are barriers to entry, because they do not have the freedom to enter and exit, they won't be driven to zero economic profit. What a likely outcome is that they can earn excess profits. This graph is not a graph for that. We'll draw it later, but you can imagine if there are excess profits, we're going to probably be drawing that average total cost curve lower than where it currently is to be showing that the monopoly will be earning economic profit. Is this monopoly, in this second question right here, is the monopoly productively efficient when they're earning zero economic profit? So what's that definition? What is productive efficiency? Productive efficiency, if you remember, is producing at minimum ATC, producing at your lowest possible cost, using your resources so that you're producing at lowest possible cost. And minimum ATC on this particular graph would be right here. And you can see that they are not productively efficient. So the monopolist is not allocatively efficient, and the monopolist is not productively efficient, even when they are producing at zero economic profit, like they were for perfect competition. All right, moving on. Get rid of this. All right. So are monopolies bad then? So we've just determined that they are not allocatively efficient. They are not productively efficient. And so we would say that would seem that they're just categorically all bad. So what are the inefficiencies of a monopoly outside the graph that we can talk about? And that's these X inefficiencies, or the idea that firms lack the incentives to control costs. Why would firms lack the incentive to control cost of production? Because of a lack of competition. There's no incentive to reduce cost of production when you don't have to worry about competition. And given that they control most of the market, they oftentimes will avoid risk. Why rock the boat? There would be no reason to change. You don't have to stay out ahead of anybody. And so they might avoid risk. And the third reason might be that it just allows for incompetency. A lack of competition allows for a lot of complacency in the business, and therefore an inability to control cost. What this graph here is showing you is that when you can, this is average total cost. This top average total cost curve would be for the monopolists. But it could be, if it had competition, the average total cost curve would probably be lower, this lower average total cost curve. So we would say that monopolies oftentimes are producing on an average total cost curve that's too high because of a lack of incentive to control costs. Another aspect of monopolies, are all monopolies bad? Well, maybe not. Why would a monopoly not necessarily be bad? One of the reasons we can give to that, and we've talked about this before, this isn't a new concept for you, you guys have some familiarity with this, is that industries with high fixed costs, like electric companies, would have a long and falling long-run average total cost curve. They've got electric lines, they have nuclear power plants, coal-fired plants. This is an expensive industry, lots of fixed cost. And when you have lots of fixed cost, you might want to spread those fixed costs over a larger quantity output. So whenever the long run average total cost curve is falling, you have economies of scale, right? Meaning that if you double your inputs, you would more than double your output, so your cost of production would be falling. If we had, if we're producing, let's say we're trying to get to an output of 20. Right here. And we had one firm producing 20 at this cost of production. If we had 4 firms producing 5, if we had 4 firms producing a quantity output of 5, each of these firms would have this much higher cost of production right here. That would be silly. Why not have one firm producing all 20 at a much lower cost of production? So this is the idea of economies of scale. So if you see that the long run average total cost curve is still long and falling, then that is an indication that this is an industry that has economies of scale and is a natural, what we call a natural monopoly. So are all monopolies bad? Technology advances. Well, there is some idea also, and again, not just natural monopolies, but the idea that a monopoly will make better technology advances because they can use those excess profits for research and development, like a pharmaceutical company. But there's no guarantee that that would happen because X inefficiency would indicate that they were not motivated to do this. Remember, they weren't motivated to rock the boat, make changes, and they might let complacency enter into the industry. And so for a variety of reasons there, we're not guaranteed that these excess profits would be used in ways to actually create technology advances. They might be just used to satisfy stockholders or a variety of other things. Or we could argue that they will be motivated to spend large sums on research and development because they are motivated to protect their monopoly power. So this might be true more in industries like Apple, like we've seen with Apple. You know, they used to spending huge sums of money, or maybe Google spending huge sums of money to make advancements. Why? Because they want to stay out front. You know, they want to maintain their monopoly power for the future. So it's kind of jury is out whether monopolies are pouring their dollars into research and development in productive ways. So what or should be some solutions to monopolies? You know what we want to have prevent monopolies that charge too much and reduce output, creating not so that they're not allocatively efficient. So if a monopoly is egregious, when a monopoly power is, you know, clear and evident, we've used antitrust laws to break monopolies up, like Standard Oil or Microsoft. And then I included a link in here to this case study on AT&T and T-Mobile, and what they wanted to merge, I think back in 2011 it was, and that we used antitrust violation to stop that merger. So AT&T was arguing and that they would be able to provide service in rural areas. They also used fancy words of how they could, you know, stay on the leading edge of product development, but had fancy words for that kind of thing. But the government felt that there was too much concentration already in the cell phone service industry and felt it would not be beneficial to the consumer, that to keep prices lower for consumers and to keep more innovation in the market, it would be better to prevent that merger. Public ownership is another option. We don't have a lot of that here in the United States. You might see a little bit more of that in Europe. Take rail transportation in Europe, public transportation's oftentimes publicly owned. The argument against public ownership is that there's little incentive to keep cost of production down and offer high quality products. And it might, if it's owned by the government, you could see how that could be begin to serve the political interests of connected people, like you might have in the oligarchies of Russia or something like that. But we don't have a lot of public ownership in the United States, so it's not necessarily a solution that we've looked to here for monopolies. Europe would probably argue that public rail has been beneficial in the way that they would use transportation routes that are highly traveled to subsidize less traveled transportation routes, but still necessary. So they can provide a really good end-to-end services throughout the entire country for public transportation. Regulated monopolies is a solution, quote, solution that we have used here in the United States. And we use them oftentimes where their economies of scale exist. And we want to allow for the monopoly, but we want to regulate the monopoly to make sure that the price of the product is not too high for the consumer. So we use this with electric companies, for example. So let's look at ways we can regulate a natural monopoly. How can we regulate them? So the first way to regulate the natural monopoly would be to regulate it to the idea that you are regulating to allocative efficiency. What if we wanted to regulate the monopoly to the point of it being allocatively efficient? So what's the profit maximizing quantity output? So let's look at our graph here. Where would MC equals MR? So right here. I'm gonna grab red. Okay, and I should probably say about this particular graph, and that is this, that you can see that the average, and that would be average cost. That's average total cost. That's fine. Average total cost is still long and falling, indicating it's a natural monopoly. In fact, our marginal cost curve hasn't even started to go up, indicating that we're still really in the stage here where fixed costs are still spreading and causing our costs to be falling. So we would, with a monopolist, given these curves, would want to produce right here, right? And they would want to charge a price right here. So this is the quantity for the monopolist, QM, and here's the price for the monopolist, PM. MC equals MR, right? Quantity, price for the monopolist. All right. What's allocatively efficient? What if we wanted to regulate them to allocative efficiency? What if we wanted to say, you must produce what is allocatively efficient? Well, that would be where price is equal to marginal cost. Where is that? Demand curve is our price curve. It's right here. So this is allocatively efficient. That would be the output. QA would be the output. And the price, since we're already on the price curve there, PA. Looks great, right? Wow, lots more output, much lower price. Let's do that. But if you're looking at this, you're seeing a potential problem. This is not going to last for long. What's the problem? But the monopoly will want to exit in the long run because this price, the price of 9.2 here, the price of 9.2, this price right here is below the average total cost for that output. Okay, so price is less than average total cost at that output. And so the monopoly would be making an economic loss and would say to themselves, we must exit. So possible solution. What's a possible solution to this problem? Well, the government could just subsidize the loss to keep the monopoly from exiting. Okay, so in this particular case, given this particular graph, right, if we were to try to regulate to allocative efficiency, the firm would be making a loss and be motivated to exit in the long run. And the only way to stop that then would be to subsidize that loss and to keep them around. How about let's look at one last way to regulate, a different way to regulate, let's say. All right. What if we want to regulate to what we call fair return? We're going to learn what fair return is here. Same graph, right? Profit maximizing, quantity output. Let's put those points back on there again. Same thing. You probably can do it faster than me right now. So this would be, because it's MC equals MR, right? Marginal cost equals marginal revenue. This is the quantity the monopolist would want to produce. I go up to the price curve, right? Right here. That's the quantity for the monopolist. Okay. So what if we were to regulate to normal or zero economic profit? That's what fair return is. Fair return is this idea of normal, zero. They're synonyms, all meaning the same thing. So what would that mean? If you're earning zero economic profit, you guys got this. Price would have to equal average total cost, right? Price would have to equal the average total cost. That's what zero economic profit would mean. So where is the price? Well, here my demand curve is my price curve. This is average total cost, right? So that would be right here. They would regulate to this point right here. This is the quantity that they would be producing. So this is Q0, right? And the price would be right here, P0. No reason to subsidize them. They're breaking even. This is not allocative efficiency. I'm going to pick a different color. This point is not allocatively efficient, however. Allocative efficiency is price equals marginal cost. It's right here. This would be Q allocative efficient. But it's closer. It's closer to allocative efficiency. And the price, this would be price allocative efficiency. So we got the price down some, right? But not all the way to allocative efficiency. We got the quantity up some, but not all the way to allocative efficiency. Okay, so the monopoly will be making just enough to stay in business, and it gets us closer to that allocatively efficient point. But this is a simple solution in theory, but difficult in reality. You know, the monopoly would need to be sharing with regulators, cost of production, and some, there can be different interests involved when negotiating what is a fair price that a monopolist can charge for a particular product. So because you'd still want the monopolist to be innovative. For example, in electricity, you might want the monopolist, we would want to encourage them to be innovative in seeking out new sources of green energy. But that could be costly to the monopolist. And if the monopolist thinks that they can't recover those costs because the regulators won't allow them to raise the price, the rates at which they charge, then it would be difficult for that monopolist to move to more efficient long-term industry outputs of green energy or something like that. So there could be downsides. There's always a downside to everything. But this is how, at least oftentimes with electricity, it is regulated to what we call like a fair return in the market. So the next time we meet, we will be talking, at least on in the next time we meet, in the sense of on a video like notes kind of situation here. We'll be talking about monopolies and price discrimination. I want to leave you with one last thing on here. I think we'll go back, if I could. I'm just going to go back to a blank space that I have here. All right, and I just wanted to show you the last thing that might be helpful for some of the questions that I assigned on AP Classroom to you. We're finding a deadweight law, the area of deadweight loss. We've spent a lot of time looking at that allocative efficiency, right? And where the monopolist is actually producing. So if you want to stay with us, you can stay with us. All right, might be helpful for a few questions. All right, here's our monopoly, PEQ, demand curve, marginal revenue curve, marginal cost curve. The monopolist wants to produce here, right? This is where the monopolist wants to be producing. Q, M, they're charging a price, P, M, right? But they are not what? Allocatively efficient. Allocative efficiency is right here. So where's that idea of that deadweight loss? Where's that idea of that deadweight loss? Well, this is what's socially optimal or allocatively efficient. You're also going to sometimes begin to see that allocative efficiency, also what we called socially efficient. Also it's a social efficiency. Well, what we are producing here, deadweight loss, remember, it's total surplus that is lost. So you find out where you are producing. It's pointing where you should be producing, and it would be between your demand curve and your supply curve. So your deadweight loss would be in this area right in here. That would be your deadweight loss. If we were looking if you were looking for the producer surplus in this area, your producer surplus, remember, is going to be below your price. Producer surplus is going to be found in this area down in here, below the price and the supply curve, right? And your consumer surplus is still going to be here. Your consumer surplus would be above the price and towards the willingness of the consumer. So those things are all the same from our former units, and you'll see some questions that kind of exercise some of those skills on some graphing questions that you'll receive. So till next time, good luck. See you on our Zoom room.